Well, good afternoon, everyone, and very warm welcome to, and as you can see, the words are on the screen in front of you. My name is James Daly. I'm a Member of Parliament for Bury North in Greater Manchester. I'm the co-chair of the Northern Culture All-Party Parliamentary Group. My colleague Julie, the co-chair, is also with us and will say something in a second. But I'm delighted you're all here for the launch of our report. It's been a fantastic evidence-gathering process. Something we're all very passionate in. We all want to transform the North. We want to make sure that culture is a driver of artistic, of social, of economic change and regeneration that reflects each town and each street and each and every one of us who live in the north of England. It's been a wonderful process. I should say thank you very much to our secretariat, to Jill, who you just heard from. All I can say is Jill is magnificent. I don't think anything else really needs to be said other than that. And everybody who's helped Jill in respect to putting this report together. So Julie.
Thank you very much. And I endorse everything James said in thanking everyone. And I think what we've done here with this report is achieve a really good cross-section of views from across the wider northern region. And I think it's an excellent example of genuine cross-party working to look at an area of the country where we have shared and common interests and desires for how we move forward around the cultural agenda. So I look forward to hearing what people have to say, and we'll be coming back later in the meeting. Thanks very much.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Julie. We have a fantastic, you see the report title, we have a fantastic collection of speakers, and you want to hear from them rather than me. So first of all, Lord Parkinson, Parliamentary Under Secretary of State for Arts, Department for Culture, Media and Sport. Lord Parkinson, are you with us?
I am indeed. Hello.
I'll hand over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation to join you today for the launch of your report, and congratulations to James, Julie, all the members of the APPG, to Katie and everyone who's been involved in producing it. What's very powerful and encouraging is the way that you've brought people together from different political parties, different levels of government, and different parts of the North to make a collective case for Northern culture. Because, of course, while there are some common threads, there's no single place called the North. Northern culture is a rich tapestry of subcultures, cultural exchanges, even friendly rivalries, whether that's across the Pennines or, as Julian and I will appreciate, between Geordies and Mackhams, for instance. But as is the case in the arts much more widely, the beauty lies in that diversity and in the things which blossom from the way we all interact with each other. But the north of England also has a strong tradition of solidarity, and I think you've used that very effectively to make the case for the north as a whole through your report. I hope you'll see that you've got a receptive audience here at DCMS, not least because you have a Secretary of State who's proudly from Merseyside and an Arts Minister who's very proudly from Tyneside. But we're all here at DCMS determined to make sure that everybody, wherever they're from, has the opportunity to enjoy the transformative power of culture, whether that's in their own lives, in their communities, or in the economic benefits that it can help to deliver. And as you make clear in your report, the north of England has deep and strong foundations to support its culture-led renewal. I'm particularly excited and proud to be a DCMS minister in the year that we celebrate the 1900th anniversary of Hadrian's Wall and the return to the northeast of the Lindisfarne Gospels. But the examples carry on through the generations, through the centuries, and continue today with exciting new ventures as well as imaginative transformations. I've seen in my own lifetime the way that culture-led renewal has breathed new life into places which are in themselves cherished parts of our cultural heritage. The way it's rippled down the Tyne, for instance, from the Baltic flour mill and the biscuit factory to the creative hub of the fish quay at North Shields. And I was especially pleased as a DCMS minister to make one of my first visits to the Jam Jar Cinema in Whitley Bay, which took an old job centre and turned it into a popular local business, which now employs 17 people. And that sort of thing is happening right across the north of England as brilliant new ventures build on, repurpose and celebrate our cultural past. Industrial buildings are now home to world-leading creative organisations like Bradford's Mind the Gap, a world-class performance and live art company which puts people with learning disabilities at the heart of the artistic process, housed in what was once the world's largest silk mill. So I read your report on how we can rebuild, rebalance and recover Northern culture with all of that in mind. And I'd like to congratulate you all on such a thorough and well-argued report, which has marshalled evidence from a very wide range of people who are directly involved in the cultural sectors right across the north of England. And thank you to everybody who's contributed and given evidence to it. I was pleased to see as well that you engaged with my colleague Neil Mendoza, Lord Mendoza, who's the Commissioner for Cultural Recovery and Renewal here at DCMS. And I was especially pleased to see how often the report's conclusions and recommendations chime with the work that the government is doing, both in the north and across England more widely, in our levelling up agenda, generating economic growth, instilling and cementing pride in local places, and increasing opportunities for people wherever they live. You highlight, for instance, the Cultural Compact model, which is delivered by DCMS in partnership with our arm's length body, Arts Council England, as a form of best practice for galvanising cross-sector partnerships which put culture and heritage at the heart of planning, giving examples from places like Newcastle, Morecambe and Hull. Your report calls for a better understanding of the true value and benefits of Northern culture and heritage, and our groundbreaking Culture and Heritage Capital Programme is developing a formal and analytically robust way to value cultural and heritage sites and better recognise their true economic impact and the contribution they make both locally and regionally. And your report highlights the need for future rounds of the Levelling Up Fund to prioritise culture and heritage, just as the first round did. Now, while that sits with my colleagues at the Department for Levelling Up Housing and Communities, and I'm pleased to see that Neil O'Brien is contributing to today's discussion as well, I was very glad to see so many cultural projects succeed in round one of the fund, whether that's support for the extraordinary Wentworth Woodhouse, the development of new theatres in Colne Town Centre, and a major redevelopment of Tate Liverpool, the Museum of Liverpool and the Albert Docks. We're working closely with our colleagues at DLUC on the second round of that fund. I just wanted to take the opportunity also to mention briefly some of the wider work that DCMS is doing to support the recovery and renewal of Northern culture and heritage. Our groundbreaking Cultural Recovery Fund has already allocated more than £1.5 billion, with recipients including Barnsley's Brass Bands England Network, Lowry in Salford, and Little Inventors, an inspirational creative education organisation which works with children and is based in Newcastle. We're also investing in a number of set-piece development projects to help strengthen the cultural heritage and visitor economy offering right across the north. The Cultural Investment Fund is providing over £18 million for the redevelopment of the National Railway Museum in York, which will expand the exhibition space and improve accessibility there, as well as contribute to a wider place-shaping vision which the city has got. It's already such a popular historic tourist destination. We'll announce further investment in libraries, museums and cultural regeneration projects right across England from the latest round of the Cultural Investment Fund later this year. And we've allocated £120 million to support the British Library's development of new storage facilities in Boston Spa near Wetherby to house our growing national collection, as well as the library's work towards a new British Library North in Leeds, bringing visitors, researchers and all of the associated economic benefits that they bring to West Yorkshire and beyond. We're restoring and renovating much-loved cultural venues like Hartlepool's Borough Hall and Carlisle's Tully House Museum and Gallery for the benefit of residents, visitors and creative employees alike. And finally, this year sees the launch of Unboxed, a groundbreaking celebration of creativity and innovation across science, tech, engineering, arts and maths, which will reach all the parts of the country through 10 free-to-attend major creative projects in over 80 sites across the UK, including Blackpool, Bradford and Sheffield, as they host the immersive Story Trails project, and in Newcastle, one of 4 English cities which is hosting the Tour de Moon Festival as part of Unboxed. So I look forward to working with you in that spirit of Northern solidarity and in the cross-party collaborative way that you've shown is possible on all of these things and more as you follow up your report, as you certainly should, to make sure that we're delivering the exciting opportunities that we all want to see for people across the north of England. But in the meantime, let me just finish by saying thank you again for inviting me to be part of your discussion today. Congratulations again on such an important piece of work, which recognises the true potential of our cultural, creative and heritage landscape in the north. I hope to look forward to the rest of today's discussions and to working with you all in the future.
Thank you, Minister. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for your contribution as one of the inquiry sessions as well. We now have Neil O'Brien and Lucy Powell, but as is the modern world, it's pre-recorded, I'm afraid, so I apologise to everybody who's here. I think, Jill, whichever way, either Neil or Lucy first, and if we could just hear their contributions.
Well, can I start by congratulating James and Julie for a brilliant and very important report. When you think about the North, clearly culture is a hugely important part of the North's identity, but also its economy. And that's not just because the creative sector is a huge and important sector in its own right, but it's because having that incredible cultural heritage and industry is also a huge attractor for talented people, entrepreneurs, and a magnet for new investment. And when you think about the North, you think easily from that incredible waterfront in Liverpool that draws people from all over the world, to new institutions like the Factory in Manchester, to brilliant new visions like the Sculpture Triangle in Yorkshire, the Opera North up to the Sage and the Baltic in Gateshead. Incredible offering. But what this report does is bring us something extra, which is to think not just about those huge flagship institutions, but about the importance of small creators, new people just starting out for the first time, to think about how we use the new digital technologies, and to think about how we get better at measuring not just the inputs from government, but also the outputs of this incredibly important and dynamic sector. So it's a brilliant report. I congratulate the authors and everyone involved in making it happen.
Hello, it's good to meet you, albeit virtually. I'm absolutely delighted as the new Shadow Secretary of State for Digital Culture, Media and Sport and the MP for Manchester Central, one of our cultural and sporting hubs here in the North. I'm absolutely delighted to join you and to welcome this really important report from the APPG for Northern Culture. We have such proud heritage and culture right across the North, in our towns, our cities and elsewhere. And I think it's really important that we showcase that. We show that it needs more support, more investment. And I know as the MP for Manchester Central and someone who has lived and worked here all my life, how important that story and that narrative of our city's renaissance has been underpinned by the cultural offer and recognising that we needed to have a much stronger cultural offer as part of that journey. So it's really important to that here in Manchester. And the culture and creative industries have been really hit hard by the pandemic. They need that extra support. We need to recognise the value that that brings to levelling up to the North as well. And so I fully support the report, all the work that you're doing to drive up the investment, attention, interest in the culture of the North of England. And you know, one thing we've done so well in the North, I think, in recent years, and I'm really determined that we continue to do, is to speak with one voice and to come together, whether we're from Manchester, Newcastle, Cumbria, or the Humber and everywhere in between, that we come together with one voice and we stand behind reports like this and really get what we need from the government and from elsewhere. So thank you for all your efforts and look forward to meeting you in person soon.
It's a great pleasure to speak at the Northern Culture APPG. The fact is that I'm a proud Northern myself. I'm from Cheshire, Chester to be precise, and also as my position as Select Committee Chair, we're currently looking at an inquiry into the levelling up of culture. For too long, the predominance of our cultural spend has been centred on London and the South East, and we have not been making enough of the rich seam of talent that we have in north of Watford Gap. So I really welcome this, the APPG and its ongoing work in this area, and I think we need to really turn up the volume across government when it comes to ensuring that the North, the voice of the North, is heard loud and clear throughout our cultural sectors.
Well, that's brilliant. You had the bonus there of Julian Knight as well, so things are going well today. I'm under strict orders to ask people to tweet, so please tweet away if that's the right phrase. Whatever people do on social media, do it, because this is a good day and this is a positive day where we're highlighting some of the great things about Northern culture. Now, this report was written, I was about to say we couldn't have done this without the next person. This person was the person who's been there the whole way through, the person who's advised us, kept us on the straight and narrow. We've absolutely used her vast knowledge to help us in terms of understanding some of the cultural challenges that the North is facing. So our next speaker is Professor Katie Shaw, and Katie wrote the report, and she's going to go through the case for culture and the 10-point plan, which we're all here for, the report launch. Katie.
Lovely, thanks so much, James. So yeah, welcome to the launch, and welcome to those people who have been here since the very beginning. It's been an amazing process, and the APPG really launched originally because we felt that there was a feeling in the sector, and that the evidence really suggested that we're constantly hearing about the so-called value of the North in terms of things like trains and technology and business and brokerage. But for the first time, this report evidences why and how culture is the quickest and also the most underused lever for levelling up the North today. The evidence has suggested that there's been a really dramatic shift in thinking over the pandemic. And now we're in a position where we need to think about rebuilding, rebalancing, and recovering the North in terms of its very rich cultural capital, and better understanding that capital today as well. The North has really rich capital when we think about heritage and the arts and the creative industries. And as a result of the pandemic, we've seen huge moves by government to try and protect those industries through the Cultural Recovery Fund and through furlough. And today we're in a position where many of our cultural organisations have survived the pandemic and now in a position where they're not concerned anymore necessarily just with surviving, but also with thriving, and thinking ahead about what they can do today to make things prosper. So what are the opportunities then for Northern culture today? We need to think really carefully about how culture can help us level up in terms of some of the key agenda items facing and some of the key challenges really facing society today. We need to think a lot about how culture can help us deliver to agendas like net zero and the carbon offset and net zero agendas, digitisation, the skills agenda, and the report has extensive recommendations around skill sets and the creative skill sets today. We also need to think about the way in which culture can help deliver to our high streets and high street regeneration, and thinking about how we can use those perhaps formerly dormant sites to repurpose and think about how cultural industries can come in and help connect communities in these spaces. So thinking about culture as a lever, how can we feed that into how we think about the North today? Well, the evidence suggests from the inquiry that there's a really strong need today for a new cohesive brand North. And this was cross-sector feedback from across the North and from across the industries. This idea that what we need is a really dynamic and global facing new narrative of the North today, one that speaks to tourism as much as it does to industry and investment, to really capture the diversity of voices and opportunities in the North today, and also to recognise the richness of that diversity. The danger is, I think, that people tend to, and the evidence suggests this, you know, when people hit the M1, as we've just heard, they see that sign saying the North, and people just think about the North as being this big homogenous whole that you hit when you go past Birmingham, and that's it. What the evidence inquiry shows is that the diversity and the nuance between all of our wonderful diverse spaces and voices in the North is its opportunity, is its value. So as a result, we've heard from all sectors, but we've also heard the barriers that are faced by difference. So the challenges that face not only cities trying to recover from the pandemic, but also culture in city regions in terms of barriers to access, and rural areas and coastal areas too, that will cross many of the constituencies of the MPs and peers here today and the mayors. So we need to think really carefully about how we can navigate barriers to access for both producers and consumers of culture, and enable communities to co-own and co-create, and also in many ways co-evaluate their own cultural experiences going forward. To do this, we need to think really carefully about how we level up funding for culture. The Cultural Recovery Fund has been great for many, but we've learned a lot from it. We need to think about flexible funding. We need to think about making funding more accessible and making the language of the dark art of funding bids far more transparent. We need to think about cultural capacity. So it's not just the big organisations who are in a position to be really responsive to these very short-term deadlines. And we also really need to think about how we can train and embed cultural leadership in organisations so that they can come together and be rewarded for collaborating. And that's something that certainly came across in the sector, that sense that when certain bids come out, they're encouraging false competition between cultural organisations, when actually it'd be better for them and for all of us if these organisations could share knowledge, transfer knowledge, and bid together. So we need to think about how we spread funding, but also ultimately how we spread power. And that's this last point. The one thing that, if you can take away anything from this report, is that we need more devolution of power and control and funding when it comes to culture. The one thing that could really meaningfully change levelling up from a metaphor to a lived reality is by devolving more of this funding and control to the people in the regions and to the combined authorities. Mayors are punching above their weight when it comes to a lot of issues. They have very limited, in relative terms, control and budgets, and they're creating cultural programmes across the north that are hugely innovative, in many ways world leading with what they're doing. And this shows us what can be achieved, and those people can do more. Those organisations can do more. What we need to do, the report recommends and the evidence suggests, is devolve funding, devolve control to the people who create the culture, the people who consume the culture, and the people who are best placed to create culture and a sustainable talent pipeline for culture for the next generation. So we can really ensure that culture is by all, for all going forward.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Katie, and thank you for all your hard work, as I said before, in terms of producing this report, which I think is a really important report. We've got government ministers and eminent mayors and various other politicians who are listening, and hopefully some of the points we raised will really hit home. It was a cross-party report done for shared ambition, for our shared ambition for the North and for the cultural sector. So it's been a pleasure for me during this inquiry to work with my co-chair, Julie. I'm going to hand over to you now, Julie.
Thank you very much, James. And that was really interesting listening to everyone. And thank you very much, Katie, for summarising quite a lengthy report in just a few minutes. It's lovely. Katie is from Northumbria University in Newcastle, which is where I went, although when I went there, it was Newcastle Poly. And I still stick to saying I went to Newcastle Poly, not Northumbria. But brilliant start to our session this afternoon. We've got some videos, I think, from some of the mayors across the region, I think from Andy Burnham, Jamie Driscoll, and also from Councillor Susan Hinchcliffe. So I think if we show those first.
Julie, if you could go first to Dan and Lord Inglewood, because they've got time limitations. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Isn't on that. Okay, Dan, first.
Well, thank you, Julie. Congratulations to you, to James, and to everybody who's been involved with the production of this, I think, is really important and significant report. I'm really pleased to be here today. There's one or two other things, as you and James will certainly know, going on in the world of politics today, but this is an important report, and I'm very pleased to be here at the launch and to add my voice to those speaking to praise the release of what, as I say, I think is a really important milestone report. It seems somewhat like preaching to the converted to say that this report has confirmed what most of us here have always known to be true, that there is a clear and strategic case for investment in culture in the North. And although it's always great to be proved right, what is more important is that we now have the evidence, not to prove others wrong, but to win them over to our point of view. So I think we need to use this evidence consistently and repeatedly to make our case as robust and convincing as possible, because for too long, the arts, culture and heritage have been seen as a nice to have, a luxury, rather than an essential tool to deliver economic and social transformation, especially across the north of England. Unfortunately, we have to fight for economic credibility in a way that other sectors do not. But the great thing about this report and its 10-point plan is that it gives us the ammunition to do this and to champion this agenda in a united way. And we can all be clear on what we now need to do to progress in unlocking the huge potential of culture right across the north of England. This report rightly says that we now have a once-in-a-generation opportunity to do this, most especially after the devastation and the continuing impact of the pandemic on the sector, on the north, and on our society. We need to seize the moment and set out a new agenda for culture in the north, while placing it at the very heart of our recovery. It's timely, I think, that we use the flagship policy of the government, levelling up, as a mechanism to achieve this. In providing evidence to the APPG, I said that levelling up had to be more than just an economic mission. It had to be about improving how people feel about the places where they live, with culture being central to this. The report built upon this principle, affirming that culture is the quickest and most underused lever for levelling up today. We all as a collective need to be shouting this from the rooftops and leading by example. I've been trying to do this both in Parliament as an MP and in my work as the Mayor of South Yorkshire. And I'm really pleased and proud that my fellow Metro Mayors have been so engaged with and have responded so positively to this report, because I believe that collectively we have a really important role to play in promoting this agenda. Evidently, so do others, with the report giving us the not unambitious action to unite to become the most powerful champions of culture as a tool of levelling up. Personally, it would be a privilege to take on that mantle, and I'm sure my colleagues feel the same, because as local leaders, we know what's happening on the ground. We know what our region needs, and we can act creatively and innovatively to design interventions to address these needs more effectively than can be done from Whitehall. One example of this in South Yorkshire is my £1 million of investment to stimulate activity across the arts, culture and heritage sector. This will not only help recovery, but will kickstart renewal in the areas where we know we have gaps to plug. This is a funding of broad programme of events, from artist residencies to commissions to add vibrancy to festivals and events across multiple disciplines, and topping up the heavily oversubscribed Sheffield Freelancer Fund. Crucially, we will also be undertaking an evaluation of this activity to inform us what works, what we could do better, and the breadth, the socio-economic impacts of the programme. This is what proper devolution looks like, using local expertise to direct the right funds to the right place where it can really make a big difference. And although £1 million might not seem earth-shattering, I had to fight hard to carve out these funds for the sector, and I'm funding our broader cultural programme through my own mayoral funds. I want to be ambitious and I want to do more, as I'm sure all of you here today do too. But to do that, we need the government to match this ambition as well. The report clearly demonstrates that our agenda more than meets a whole host of post-COVID priorities, including levelling up, net zero and climate change, tourism, high street and town centre regeneration, digital integration, and health and well-being. The number of contributors to the report and the number of people here today illustrate what a critical first step we have made in showing how culture and underpinning research can make a difference to the north, to our regions, and to the lives of the people who live here. Now, we need to join forces to promote this report and its key messaging, and to secure funds for implementing its recommendations, using the armoury of arguments and evidence the report has provided us with. Our cultural future is bright, and there is a wealth of fantastic work going on in all manner of areas, in all types of organisations, and in all corners of the north. But we need to ensure that this fantastic work continues, that it grows, and that everyone is able to take part and access it as we emerge from the pandemic. Thank you once again to the authors of the report and to my colleagues who support the APPG. I look forward to working with you all to progressing this important agenda further. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you very much, Dan. And as Dan said, he's been using some of his mayoral funds to help this agenda, which shows that if you devolve power and money, things can happen. So I will bring in Lord Inglewood next. So apologies for the mix-up, Lord Inglewood.
Julie, well, thank you very much. And I'm, like other speakers, very pleased to be here to the launch of the Northern Culture APPG's case for culture, which obviously is significant in itself. But at least as important in the current climate is the fact, as we know, has been mentioned already, it's a key component of levelling up. And Michael Gove has said specifically about levelling up that it's about pride in place. And of course, culture is the cement that binds place together. As well as being a member of the House of Lords, and incidentally, a predecessor of Lord Parkinson's in the last century, I'm chairman of the Cumbria LEP, which makes me part of the NP11, which represents the whole of the north of England, from the city centres right through to the heads of the dales. And at the last convention of the North in Rotheram 2 years ago, we launched a programme of work on place, which was perceived as being quite a radical step at that time. Not, of course, that it seems so now. And this has been led by me and the chairs of the North Yorkshire LEP, first David Carefoot and now Helen Simpson. And we are doing some work which is due to be completed on place at the end of March. The final consultation is going to be launched, we hope and believe, at the Convention of the North in Liverpool on the 8th of February. So I would urge responding to that consultation because culture plays a material and significant part in it. And what I hope this will show is that this is an idea whose time has come, and we will come forward with conclusions which represent distinct policy approaches, which in turn will lead to definite concrete outcomes. And they will be relevant across, I believe, the whole of the north of England, and of course they will recognise subsidiarity and different sectoral and jurisdictional responsibilities. And the underlying purpose of all this will be to promote the evolution of the northern whole, which is both diverse and collaborative, and at the same time is larger than the sum of its parts, and which will bleed virtuously across boundaries to add value. Now, as you've already said, I've got a meeting, I've got to go to the other end of Whitehall, but Claire Devaney, who's been the brains and the engine room behind all this, is in the meeting, and I know that she will be pleased to say more and answer questions. So thank you very much for having asked me.
Thank you very much, Lord Inglewood, and thank you, Claire, for being available for questions, because after this session of contributions, we are opening up the meeting to questions. So please do indicate either in the chat or by raising your hand if you want to ask a question at the end of the contributions we're having. So I'm going to now bring in Tracy Brabin, my former colleague, who's now the Mayor of West Yorkshire. Tracy.
Oh, thank you so much, Julie. I was expecting to be at the end of the presentation, so thank you for bumping me up the list, and congratulations to everybody involved in this report and to the APPG for leading on it. And can I just say personally, thank you to Katie too for your hashtag #GrimUpNorth tweets, because they always cheer me up in the morning, because actually, aren't we an amazing place to live and work? So thank you. As some of you may know on this call, having spent 3 decades in the creative industries as an actor and a writer, I do feel I've got a unique sort of ringside seat into what the creative industries are about and what they can do for us. And it's not just about show business and superstars and films, and of course that there's a place for that, but it's also about opportunities, it's about skills, it's about training, about regeneration, inward investment, well-being, robust mental health because of taking part in culture. And I wanted to bring that into my new role as the mayor, as I have done, as the member of Parliament for Batley and Spen. And in fact, one of my proudest achievements in Batley and Spen was the Batley and Spen Youth Theatre, that auditing the impact of that opportunity on those young people. Their lives have been spectacularly changed, hopefully for the better, but so many of them have gone on to things they would never have done without that opportunity. So we know how transformative it can be. Now, I am so proud, 8 months in, to be the Mayor of West Yorkshire, and we've already got a rich cultural heritage: theatres, film companies, sculpture parks, literature festivals, gaming companies. We're 7% of the whole UK gaming sector, music, independent cinemas, dance, galleries, museums, the list goes on. But I know, and I can see the potential for levelling up and using culture as a tool. And that's why this report is going to be so helpful as we go forward. I set up the first ever culture committee in West Yorkshire, the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. We didn't have one as a voice for the sector. And I've sent this report to all of my members, so we'll be using it as a template going forward. The first thing I did in the first weeks of being the mayor is allocate £500,000 for that committee to get us going, to have a pipeline of resources. £190,000 of that was immediately given to Screen Yorkshire to set up the mayor's diversity scheme, where diverse youngsters can get training in film and TV. I know it's about experience on a film set and making contacts and proving yourself in a sector where it's often so hard to get in. And actually this round, 5 times oversubscribed, and really excited that quite a large proportion of those candidates who've been chosen have a disability, because I think that's also something that people don't often talk about in the creative industries. But it's not just about getting a job in the sector. It's also about taking part, isn't it? To be part of something, to be the hero in your own story can be transformative and enable you to see your world through a different lens. So I'm really excited about the work that we're doing. Over the last 8 months, we've already hit the ground running with £6 million. As a scheme for entrepreneurs. We know so much of our entrepreneurial ideas are creative. 13.5 million for skills and training, 5 million to our economic recovery projects in each of our 5 regions, and a fair chunk of that going to recovery for the cultural sector because of COVID. I'm so thrilled to be the mayor during what is going to be an explosion of culture in West Yorkshire. Leeds 2023's City of Culture. We've got the Kirklees Year of Music 2023. We've got Calderdale's 2024 vision, Wakefield's Year-Long Festival of Culture 2024, and shortlisted for this UK City of Culture, Bradford 2025. And I'm supporting them not just because, as Dan says, it's nice to have, but because it will level up our region. And we've got companies like Production Park in Wakefield, an ex-mining town. They are the best in the world where you can rehearse your international gig. So we've got Beyonce and superstars coming for chip butties down the fish shop in an ex-mining town. But they have a training and a skills program that is second to none as well. So we really are punching above our weight. We've got the training, Leeds Conservatoire, Leeds Arts University, Kappa College in Wakefield, which is our version of the Brit School. We have so much positivity and opportunity. However, we do need partners. We do need government to buy into our strategy, which is why it's also important to say we were so pleased when we won the bid for Channel 4 to come to Leeds, and then for government to pivot to now say, well, potentially that could be sold off because the model's not working. Channel 4 is absolutely the totem of levelling up. They are the venture capitalists that come to our region, invest in talent, invest in fledgling companies, individuals, and then because of the funding model, all the profit from that product, from that show, goes back to the company, so they can reinvest, take on more staff, have more ideas, which is why I think the campaign to push against government's consultation around Channel 4. You know, all the mayors were involved, production companies, councillors, people saying that this is a way to level up our region culturally, not just for Leeds, but across the region, Manchester, Liverpool, and I'm sure we'll hear from Steve about this as well. So if I would say to those ministers who are on the call, please do listen to local leaders when it comes to understanding the impact of a cultural institution and the impact that that has on opportunities, skills, training, sense of pride, sense of belonging, and an ability to have an international position for the North and for Yorkshire, absolutely supported by the brilliance of Channel 4. So thank you for the work that you've done on this APPG. Thank you, Katie, for using your smarts. And, you know, levelling up through culture is something I'm absolutely focused on. We've allocated roundabout, if we can get all the leaders to agree, 10 million for culture for West Yorkshire. And I know working with partners, we can go further and make West Yorkshire the place to come to if you want culture. Thanks so much. Cheers, Julie.
Thanks very much, Tracy. And one of the other groups that I'm involved in, I'm a vice chair for the Channel 4 group, and I'm delighted you flagged the issues around that. Channel 4 have actually last year made a bigger profit, and one of the real key things with the threat to Channel 4 is that some of the very small scale things that production companies that they commission, those are the things that are in danger if Channel 4 becomes privatised, and it is a huge threat. So I'm adding my voice to have my 2 pennies to ministers. So I'm now going to bring in Steve Rotheram, another former colleague, in fact, someone who had an office on the same corridor for me in our first 5 years in Parliament, from Liverpool. So over to you, Steve.
Oh, thanks, Julian, and thanks, James, as well, for hosting this, and obviously to everybody who's been involved in pulling together the report, which quite rightly highlights that culture is really important to the people across the whole North. Not that we need to be told that, but it's there, isn't it? It's stark. Indeed, the soft power that culture exercises creates the identity and the social cohesion that we as politicians are so rightly proud of. And the way in which it can be used, for me, is epitomised with what happened in 2008. Liverpool, I'm sorry to say, Julie, from your perspective, was chosen as the European capital of culture. And I think because of Brexit, it's probably the last time that the UK will have a capital of culture. But what the city of Liverpool did was to use the opportunity of that title to optimise culture, yes, but actually to use it to stimulate wider economic regeneration. And we saw the renaissance of many parts of Liverpool because of that. Indeed, there was a report, I think it was 2009, that followed that year of celebration, which identified the economic impact of that cultural stimulus. And I think now there's an accepted methodology from that about the multiplier effect derived from cultural investment. But culture, for me, isn't just about exciting and shiny events, as welcome as they are. We have the Giants and all sorts of things in Liverpool. Culture actually connects people with opportunity, and it could be a significant opportunity for the government to connect with people and to genuinely level up. So I see this happening in our own area. In fact, I see it firsthand because I do a bit to be provocative to my mayoral colleagues, I have to say, but I like to describe the Liverpool City region as the country's cultural capital. And that's because I believe that there are assets here that put us way ahead of any other area in the country. The fact that we have the most successful football club in the country is probably understood by some, but we also have unparalleled visitor attractions and offers, more museums and galleries than anywhere outside of London, 2 cathedrals, of course, our architecture, our heritage, our social history. They're all huge attractions that sustain about 50,000 jobs across the city region. And we also enjoy things that people may not be as familiar with. Stunning coastline in Sefton and the Wirral, some of the best in the country. We have rugby league in Halton and St Helens. We have the Grand National at Aintree, and often we have the golf and some of the big golfing events at Royal Birkdale and across the water in Hoylake. However, the most visited paid attraction is not in the city centre. It's actually the Safari Park in Knowsley. And later this year, that attraction will be supplemented by the Shakespeare North, which is in Prescott. And we've invested about £12 million into that. And that will support that greater geographical cultural offer, because I think it has to be more than just city centres. Everywhere should be able to celebrate their culture. And I could go on, Julie, but I won't. But I can attest to the findings in the report, especially those about culture being a driving point for change. I think we were the only city region in the country that had culture as part of our devolution agreement with central governments in 2015. So when I was elected as Metro Mayor in 2017, I launched our 1% for Culture initiative, where we invest, not surprisingly, 1% of our devolved gain share budget to arts and culture, purely for arts and culture. And part of that investment is to have a borough of culture, which is a rotating borough of culture, not the city, but the other 5 districts. And this year it's Knowsley who've got that. But we've done other things. We created a town centre fund to allow some of our struggling high streets to reimagine and reinvent themselves. And they've done that using arts and culture and independent districts and all sorts of fantastic stuff. Indeed, Future Yard CIC is mentioned in the report. We've also got high-end film production and TV productions coming to our area more and more because of the TV and film fund that we've had, and we are still the most filmed city outside of London. But also we're using our might to put a digital offer to drive the current investment in the city region. So as at this moment in time, as we're speaking, there's 212 kilometres of ultra fast dark fibre going into the ground, spanning the whole city region, connected to the fibre optic cables that link us with America and with the supercomputer. Now, that will attract many more digital cultural institutions to come to the city region. So I look at culture in the round. It's much more perhaps than government sometimes identifies it as. If they are genuinely serious about levelling up, then culture could be used as one way in which we could see people in all sorts of fields and in all parts of the country genuinely being given the opportunity to reach their full potential. That's what levelling up is about. Hopefully the government will do it, and I fully endorse all of the findings of this fantastic report.
Thanks very much, Steve. And just like Tracy, doing a wonderful job of shouting for your area of the country. And I have to say, I'm very fond of Liverpool. I spent a lot of time there in a previous job, and one of my daughters lived there for many years, so I used to visit a lot. So I'm very fond of Liverpool. We now, I think, will go to the videos, and I think we've got a video from Andy Burnham and from Jamie Driscoll, another 2 of the Metro Mayors.
Hi, I'm Andy Burnham, Mayor of Greater Manchester. As a former Culture Secretary and well-known music fan, it will probably come as no surprise to you that I strongly welcome this report and fully support its findings. The report speaks very clearly with one Northern voice, a powerful cross-party consensus among the North's political and cultural leaders that says if we're ever truly to level up the north of England with the rest of the country, that has to include culture, as culture is so central to our northern identity and also so important to our communities. The report is also saying that cultural investment and opportunity should be fairly distributed. And if it is, it can have huge benefits to the prosperity, well-being and vibrancy of our people and our places. Lifting people's spirits as well as their living standards is exactly what levelling up should be about. So I'd like to give my wholehearted endorsement to this levelling up inquiry, and I look forward to working with colleagues across the North and across the political spectrum to make the case for investment in culture across the North of England.
Industry without art is brutality. That's the slogan on the banner of the Artists' Union of England. People are not simply economic units. We have histories and interests and a desire to express ourselves and to relate to others. Culture is the customs, the ideas and the social behaviour of a particular people, Northerners in our case, and it grows from the ground up and it cannot be imposed from a central authority. So a cultural renaissance in the North means devolution to the North. As North of Tyne Mayor, I cover a huge and diverse area from the industrial heartlands of Tyneside to the Scottish border. We've invested £10 million in our cultural programme, and given that our entire investment fund is only £20 million a year, this shows our commitment to the cultural industries as a cornerstone of our economic revival. It doesn't just create jobs and support local businesses, it boosts well-being. It makes it easier for me to attract inward investment. Put simply, who doesn't want to live in a place with a vibrant culture? To give you just a flavour, we're developing local festivals that create year-round jobs in the organising. Stories give us a sense of who we are and where we belong, and this winter our Under the Stars storytelling programme is happening in communities across the North of Tyne, a series of open-air events building towards a festival in the spring. And we're funding skills training in the sector and business training support for SMEs and freelancers. We're offering millions in direct investment in cultural businesses, including patient capital and favourable loans, so that all sorts of business models, including cooperatives, can have the vital funds they need to grow. We're bringing the Lindisfarne Gospels back to their northeast home. We're celebrating the 1900th anniversary of Hadrian's Wall. Our community projects are supporting everything from community gardening to beekeeping. The point I'm making is there's no shortage of ideas and investable programmes that can simultaneously improve our economy and invigorate Northern culture. But the power to fund them must come to the North. This report is absolutely spot on that the decisions must be taken here in the North. The current practice of bidding international funds wastes time, wastes money and inhibits long-term planning. In particular, I've been lobbying the government for levelling up boards chaired by mayors in their city regions to shape national programmes in the English regions. And that's a call that's in complete agreement with this report. If the North is ever going to be the economic dynamo that we all know it can be, culture has to be at its heart.
Thank you very much for those videos. So I think what we've heard is there's a lot of key themes from all of the contributions from the speakers that we've just had that really tie in and resonate with what we are saying in the report. I'm going to ask Lord Parkinson if he has any comments, first of all, on what the contributors have said, and then I'm going to bring in Lord Mendoza. But as I said before, people can start and indicate if they would like to ask a question or make a comment. Lord Parkinson.
Well, just to say thank you again. I think again that's powerfully made the case that wherever in the North we're from, whatever sort of our political background or none, it's just really good to hear people speaking with that collective voice and and sharing the ideas, the best practice. There's a lot of good healthy competition amongst people with lots of the ideas that they're naming, but that competition levels up. The more things that are going on, the louder our collective voice is, the more people are coming. I mean, I'm sure lots of people had the same experience as me during lockdown with people taking their holidays in the UK rather than looking overseas. It was just wonderful to see people discovering new parts of the country that they hadn't visited before. And I certainly got lots of messages from friends who'd sort of gone up to the Northumberland coast for the first time and were so surprised and delighted by just how nice it is. And it's there are some good things that can come out of the pandemic. We've all been starved of those opportunities because of lockdown, and there's a real sort of pent up appetite from people to go out and have the sort of, the cultural experiences, but also and helped by the Cultural Recovery Fund, people have been able to invest in new ways of doing things, bringing their work digitally. They've also just been picking up the phone to similar organisations everywhere, sharing ideas about what they're going to do in the future. So it's really good to see lots of those things reflected in the report and the work that people are doing. So I mean, pleased to hear so many examples from so many of the passionate local leaders across the north, and I'm certainly very keen to get engaged with everybody wherever they're from, geographically or politically, because we can get so much more done working together.
Thanks very much, Lord Parkinson. I think we're now going to go over to, we've got a few people down who are wanting to ask questions. I bring in Robin Ashcroft, then Stephen Cottrell, then Bethany Haskins. Robin.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you fine, Robin.
Good. You saw me. Yeah, I mean, no, I'm portfolio holder for economic development, culture and leisure in South Lakeland. So really comments rather than a question. And I kind of read through the report as best I can, and being a mere male, I can only manage one thing at once. So, but 2 points to make really, and I really take my hat off to Yorkshire and the North East. They show confidence that, I don't know, I mean, I look at this and the Northwest doesn't seem to be hugely represented within the naming and the referencing. And I don't know how that came apart, whether we were kind of approached, but we have a lot to offer on this side of the Pennines. And could I ask that be taken into account? And again, a quick scan. I mean, the value of culture to the creative industries is well established. I know Arts Council England highlight this, and the fact that the creative sector was the largest growth sector in the UK. I mean, I'm going somewhere in the region of 80% before the pandemic, and I've no doubt that will continue once we're out of this wretched situation. But again, it would be really useful to highlight that metric. And I apologise if it is in there and I haven't picked it up in my scanning. So just those 2 points. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Robin. Stephen Cottrell had a question in the chat. Stephen.
Hello. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to speak. So yes, I'm Stephen Cottrell, and probably more relevant for this conversation, I'm the Archbishop of York, with obviously a responsibility for serving the church across this wonderful region of ours. And the first Archbishop of York was appointed in the year 627. So we have a long-standing investment in the cultural, spiritual life of the North, both as a custodian of its heritage, but also investing day after day in the cultural life of the region. And I suppose I wanted to say, first of all, how enormously excited I am by this report. And also, of course, as a parliamentarian, very much, want to express enthusiastic support for being involved in any way to take this agenda forward. But it'd be interesting, though I'm not sure I'm going to be able to stay around to hear them, because I've got to go to something else in about 5 minutes or so. It will be very interesting to hear the report, which I've only read very briefly this morning, or scanned briefly. The report speaks really positively about building, I think this is my words, not yours, but coalitions of goodwill, working in partnerships with people, and so I suppose I want to ask the question, how can we, obviously I speak for the Church of England, but I'm sure that other Christian groups and other faith communities across the North, which I work with so closely, I can't imagine any of them not receiving this report with huge excitement and encouragement, and would want to say, how can we be part of building these coalitions, not least because we have a presence in pretty much every single community across the North, where day by day we are part of building social and cultural capital. But mainly it's a big thank you for this really exciting work.
Thanks very much, Stephen. And Bethany Haskins, and then I'll go to the people who've given contributions to have some answers. Thanks. Bethany.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Yeah.
Hi, brilliant. Thanks for taking my question today. Yeah, great to see the report. And so I currently work with the culture team at the West Midlands Combined Authority. It's just really interesting to see how the North are responding to, the government's idea of levelling up. And of course, the North will be facing different challenges and opportunities to the West Midlands. But just a question around the opportunity for knowledge sharing, information sharing across regional boundaries. And whether it's been considered, kind of sharing ideas about how rebranding and branding at the regional level can take place, whilst also nodding to the diversity of the region at the same time. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Bethany. So we've got Steve, Dan and Tracy on the call, and of course we've still got Lord Parkinson. Who would like to come in and respond to some of those questions? Anybody from the panel? Perhaps Katie.
I'm happy to go.
Tracy. Okay,
yeah, I'm very happy to help you out there. People are too shy. Just to pick up the coalition of goodwill, and I think this is fundamental to what we're doing, because the goodwill needs to come from all the partners. So the goodwill from government, from the Arts Council, from local community groups, from local theatres, and understand that this isn't about politics. It's not about being able to give to one organisation that you particularly like. It is about understanding the power of it as the levelling up tool, and to share that devolution, really, to empower. It's my role to empower local companies to make their own decisions and give them the funding they need, that they can then empower local creatives to be bold and to have confidence that if they have an idea that they'll get that support. So that coalition of goodwill, and that does feed into Stephen's Cottrell. I'm sorry, I've forgotten you have a very good title, Archbishop, and your suggestion about how we all work together, and certainly the music that comes from the church and the musicians that come out of those choirs, those orchestras, and working and sharing in the same way that the brass bands who were supportive of the miners back in the day and now have their very strong identity outside of the Salvation Army, outside of the miners' marches and so on, into our community as part of our identity. So there's absolutely it's a game changer, that, I think, to say we are all part of this. We all have cultural a cultural life, but we also have a responsibility to support others in their culture. So I think it's also about the identity that your other caller had, that we have a UK identity about what our cultural life is, but we also have something that is quite true to our hearts and very reflective of our experience growing up and what we love and like to share. So it is about bringing all the partners on board. And also, one of the most brilliant things that the Arts Council does is creative people and places, and I'm sure there are people on this call that have one local to them. It's that outreach work that enables those who've never had any experience of culture at all to say, well, if you go to church and you listen to music, that is culture. If you go to the movies, that is culture. And this is an offering another type of culture, but framing it as such that we listen to the radio. That's also culture. Who's on the radio? Where do we find the pipeline of talent for our youngsters, your kids, to be able to follow their dreams and maybe become musicians who we then listen to? So it's framing culture as something that is just part of our DNA, part of everybody's life, and pretty ordinary, rather than something that you dress up for on a Saturday night and drink warm wine watching. So it's a bit of a merge of all those questions, but I thought I'd just jump in there, Julie, for you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to bring in Katie Shaw now. Katie.
Thanks. I mean, I'll speak briefly to all 3 points too. So Cumbria, to start with, this is a research underpinned piece of work. So we did an open call for evidence, and Cumbria is very well represented in the report. We had a lot of evidence coming from Cumbria. And yeah, if you have a look and read some of the quotes in there, you'll see a really strong showing from the Northwest. And again, a real capture of some of the barriers that rural and coastal communities face, right? Real barriers in terms of EDI and access and transport and connectivity and digital, that all mean that a lot of the equalising of culture that occurred in the pandemic actually didn't equalise for everybody. So there's huge infrastructural challenges there if we are to level up in culture. In terms of community and faith groups, absolutely. So the report recommends what we call prosperity partnerships. And that's really getting those never event groupings together, people you'd never normally expect to see around the table. And that includes diverse cross-sector groups. And I'd encourage everybody to have a Google of the project A Rating Chance that's on at the moment, which is a real never event grouping between ourselves at Northumbria, Joseph Rowntree Foundation, the actor Michael Sheen, the Daily Mirror and the New Statesman. Not people you'd ever think of working together, but have all come together around a challenge, which is how to get more working class voices in UK journalism today. And again, we're taking a small amount of money, but all of our resources and networks and trying to leverage that to be more than what we could double do individually. And finally, we need to think about collaboration. That's what Tracy's saying. We need to get groups working together to deliver this agenda, because it's not about politics, but it's about the greater good here. And in rating some of the wrongs that are there with culture, we can provide what are quite easy fixes and easy connectivity from everything from the skills agenda, having a cohesive creative curriculum. And I know a lot of the comments in the chat are about that, and about how we create a sustainable talent pipeline for the next generation. We need to train, retain and then retrain our next generation in the regions, for the regions, for the good of the whole UK. And that means investing in creative arts subjects, not cutting them. That means investing in BBC and Channel 4, devolving into the regions and supporting that in the long term. And it means encouraging higher education institutions and incentivising them to get involved in this. But it also means funding, and it means rewarding people for that collaboration. And currently a lot of the funding schemes don't reward cultural organisations or higher education organisations or councils for collaborating. So I think we do need some flexibility with funding and some thinking around that.
Thanks, Katie. We've now got a couple of parliamentary colleagues who want to come in and ask a question. Can I have Alex Sobel first and then Liz Twist? Thanks.
I think we might have lost Alex.
Well, I'll bring in Liz. We're doing well here. Liz.
Hi, thank you very much, Julie, and I'm sorry to have missed some of the early presentations. I think this is a really important document to be producing now, and thank the APPG for that. I know we've got a huge tradition in the Northeast, and I'm proud to represent a part of Gateshead and have the Angel of the North in my constituency. And I know that the council and other organisations have invested a huge amount of money and taken some quite bold steps to ensure that we build on that cultural heritage. And I think it's really important to do it. I know in the Northeast we've got the Northeast Culture Partnership, which is refreshing its bid. So collaborating with other regions, I think, is a really positive move to ensure that, first of all, our cultural activities are accessible to everyone across the region and across the North, and a really important part of our economy as well. So really interested to see the report. I'm not sure that was a question, Julie, but I just wanted to
very worthwhile comment, Liz. Thank you very much. Thanks. I'm going to bring in Hannah Baldwin next. Hannah's got a question.
Hello. Katie's partially answered some of it, I think, but I just wanted to say, really, through our involvement in the APPG and through the report, it's been great to have such really interesting conversations about children and young people, and particularly around the talent pipeline. But also to say that I would really welcome a broader consideration that's not just about skills and the talent pipeline and our future workforce, but is thinking much more about the creativity of children and young people in all aspects of their lives. And I know we've talked in the past about how arts, culture and creativity are very much being squeezed out of education. So I guess my question really is, we've had some brilliant individual examples of opportunities, but how can we be more strategic and joined up about making sure that all of our children and young people across the North genuinely have a wide range of opportunities to engage in arts and culture?
Thanks very much, Hannah. And I'll bring in, as we'd lost Alex, I'll bring in Mark Bailey, who's got a question.
Well, thank you very much, Julie. And I think my question really picks up on the point that Hannah has just made. This recommendation 1, rightly focuses on next generation creatives, as Katie was just explaining. But I think that this does come back to an issue of national education policy, and I'd like to pose the question: how can we use the great work of this APPG to influence national policy and rebalance education policy at a national level to ensure that our young people are experiencing the creative education that is so sorely missing at the moment?
Thank you very much. And I'm going to ask Katie to respond because Tracy's had to leave. Sorry to put you on the spot, Katie.
No, that's fine. I mean, given my role, this is incredibly close to my heart. And it does, again, speak of, for me, a real lack of connectivity and joined up thinking that on the one hand, we spent the last year gathering all this evidence about the importance of a creative curriculum at the same time as higher education were having creative arts subjects cut. And it just seemed like, why, same with Channel 4, like, why isn't the right hand talking to the left hand when it comes to this stuff? And it is a point of connectivity. The first point of this report recommends opportunity for all in relation to what Hannah was articulating very clearly. And the sense that, when I grew up, we all had the opportunity to play an instrument at school. We all had the opportunity to engage with theatre in some form. And again, like even thinking a month back, panto is often children's first interaction with the theatre. But funding for all that has been cut, and schools are having to think about, well, if we have to do this or that, what do we fund? And if universities are thinking about, oh, well, do we have to, if funding's cut for creative writing and dance courses and creative production, well, where are our next generation of creatives coming from? So we need to be more joined up in thinking about policy and also the long-term effects of policy, that if you cut the supply of blood to the talent pipeline now, don't expect that talent to be there in 10 years' time. And I think in relation to what Mark was saying, we need to think very much about how this is going to implicate our power, our soft power. Things like the BBC, things like the British Council, these are all our creative industries. These are vital to our reputation globally as a country and as a brand to attract inward investment and tourism and people who want to bring their creative skills to us. So it does seem to be cutting off our nose to spite our face in kind of cutting those amazing long-term institutions. But also in terms of thinking about the next generation of creatives, we need to think about why people would stay here for their creative talents, how they can stay in the regions and how we can enable them to do that, but also how we can help education better shape that next generation. And in many cases, this report really recommends harnessing the freelance workforce and harnessing people who are out there doing those skills right now to come into education, because although creative career advisors are wonderful and they're doing great work, it's the people out there who are doing the jobs right now that know the skills you need today. And actually, the thing I always say to my students is that the jobs they'll do in 10 years' time don't exist right now. In the same way as, social media marketing or content curators, they didn't exist when I was doing my degree. So we have to teach our students future-proof skill sets, and they start and end in arts and humanities subjects.
Thanks very much, Katie. I'm going to draw the session to a close because we seem to have exhausted questions, and some of the panel have had to leave, quite understandably. It's a busy day in politics today, shall we say, in spite of the work that we've all had planned before today started. So we're going to look at the next steps. The slides being put up, and I'm wondering if Katie can just run through these 10 points that that Katie came up with as a result of writing the report. And then I'll draw the meeting to a close. Katie, I wonder if you could just run us through these 10 points. Thanks. You're on mute, Katie. I had to
Sorry.
say that once today.
At least once. I had to actually make my screen a bit smaller because these are so very tiny on the screen in terms of people being able to see them. So if people could please maybe refer to them in the link to the report that's gone in the chat. And we will also say this report is now available as a PDF on the website for people to download and enlarge. The recommendations are really, really clear and they map across all of the stuff that we've been talking about today. So the first one is thinking about investing in the next generation of creatives, opportunity for all, and how we can work strategically to embed a creative curriculum from early years all the way through to post-compulsory. Secondly, how we can use technology to transform and unlock potential, but also how we can use it to think about the really pervasive barriers that still face some people that we've heard about today in terms of digital connectivity, broadband, and what we need to really attract the next generation of creatives and also production companies into our regions. Thirdly, we need to build back opportunities. So we need to think about how we can think about creative leadership, to tackle some of these recognised and pervasive barriers to access, and how we can foster a culture of inclusion as standard. I always say the day EDI is not an agenda item, but it's embedded in everything I do, will be the day we all can just be happy. So that's a really important point. Nextly, we need to think about generating prosperity partnerships, those so-called never event groupings that I was talking about earlier, and how we can reward people for working together and create funding bids where they can bid into to work together. Next, we need to think about securing flagship funding. So we need signature investment for the North. You know, there's lots of small pots of money here and there that people can, you know, spend a long time competing against each other to ultimately bid in for and not often get. But we need signature investments, those flagship funds, like we heard about with our Liverpool mayor, to create really long-term strategic cultural interventions in the North. And we also need to think about defining the culture of the North. And that's a really important part of the work that Neil Mendoza is doing in DCMS at the moment, to think about cultural value. Because we all sit here and go, oh, we all know the value of culture. Well, actually, it's really important to be able to put a pounds and pence value on this in order to make those arguments to government and to the Treasury about the real term returns of some of this work. And to do that, we need to think about how we build back confidence in the cultural sector. You know, for any of us who've re-entered a gallery or a theatre or a festival recently, there's still a lot of reticence about people buying tickets and going to live events. How can we support those industries to bring their audiences back effectively? Next, we need to think really about health and culture. So how can we, for example, incorporate health impact assessments into funding bids? How can we focus on partnerships that currently work, like a lot of the NHS culture partnerships that are going on in places like Leeds and also in Newcastle with Collaborative Newcastle, where the County Council, all the NHS trusts and the two universities are coming together to tackle health inequalities, again, through collaboration. And how can we promote and foster creative leadership? How can we get different people leading these creative organisations and create sustainable ecosystems where we get knowledge transfer and effective talent development going for the long term? And the last one, which again is very close to my heart, how can we measure up to level up? Because it's great saying we're going to level up, but if we don't know what levelling up means and we can't have any point two policies and point two projects for that, then how can we really measure change? And I think this final point is very much gesturing towards the incoming white paper, and it's requesting for these performance metrics, right? These indicators, because it's great to invest, it's great to think about how we're going to change things, but without a sense of how we have a focus on what we're going to change and how we're going to do that, then I think the danger of the levelling up agenda is that we will lose public confidence. And also, ultimately, we don't have very long to deliver this work before the general election. So these are our 10 points, our 10-point plan, and we really welcome any support in helping us take them forward to achieve it.
Thanks very much, Katie. I'm going to ask James Daly, my co-chair in this all-party group, to see if he has any closing thoughts before I bring the meeting to an end. James, are you there?
I'm sorry, Julie. James has just been called away on an urgent issue.
Okay, not to worry, that's fine. So it's really for me to bring this to an end. And can I thank all of the people who took part in bringing the report together. Also, all of the people who've spoken today, particularly the ministers who've taken time to join us, because I know Lord Parkinson has joined the whole meeting, and we really do appreciate that. In a sense, we do intend taking the issues the report's raised to government, but in a sense, we've already done that today. we will continue shouting out about the North and use this report as a platform to really highlight the issues and what we think, what we've concluded we can do to help the cultural sector in the North. And we'll next be moving on to launch a new inquiry in the all-party group about the importance of sport to the North's cultural assets. And if there's one thing people across the North are very, very passionate about, it is sport. So I really look forward to that. And I thank everybody for attending today and everybody, including the Secretariat, who's put so much work into producing this report. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.
Thank you, everyone.